presentation. The representative shall identify the group at the beginning of his or her presentation. A group may have no more than one spokesperson, and these are the rules. So under communication, those who wish to speak on any item not on the agenda will be heard at this time. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, you will be heard when the item is considered. So when you come forward, please give your name.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Reverend William Avon King, President of State Unit of SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and also President of the local Danville Ministerial Alliance of Danville and vicinity. It's an honor to be here today and to be a part of this great occasion that I'm going to speak to you about today. We have, as the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we have been dealing with this issue for over 30-some years within this city, and we have been dealing with this issue across the nation for a number of years. I'm here today to request the City Council to ask the State Attorney General for a ruling on the state law being used by the City Council on monuments to determine if a flag is a symbol. I would like to state to that given the Confederate flag has been placed on the world stage as a symbol of hate, the question is, who will be liable for a hate symbol being displayed on city property? I would hope that the City Council will vote to take down the Confederate flag and place it inside the museum for educational and historical purposes. We must make sure that our heritage is made clear to all that are citizens of the United States of America, that symbols of hate are not heritage unless hate is your heritage. Our history was that the law allowed colored and white-only signs. The law allowed that. But finally, the world came to the conclusion that they must come down for total integration. We hope that the last capital, as we are called, will not take this chance to correct the past with a new look on the future of Danville, Virginia. I'm here to represent the state SCLC and also the Ministers Alliance. The Ministers Alliance has made the step to the state delegates and representatives. What has happened in the city of Danville, the law has been quoted as a state law. We beg to differ with that. And why I'm here tonight is we have an organization that is a wing of us that will work with us. It's called the SCJS, Southern Coalition for Southern Justice. And we have worked on this for years, and what we're trying to avoid is any kind of lengthy litigation. We have documents we request from the city under the Freedom of Information Act when this was put together. One argument that we would share with attorneys wanted us to share with you to make clear that it's clear to all of us. The Southern Coalition for Social Justice will partner with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference on this matter. One thing is that when this was put up, the flag was put up, the statute that is being quoted was not in place, number one. Number two, the statute and a flag are two different entities. So we would hope that the City Council would also use the other avenues that you have available to you. By being property of the city, you are the owner. As an owner of any structure or building, just to give you an example, if you close a store that you own, the person that is leasing most likely won't continue to run their business there. So that's one option that we would like for you to just visit. But we would like for you to use the city's options first before you use the state options. If you cannot use the city options, we want an opinion from the state attorney general. The state attorney general will give us our opinion. That will leave us to take the step to go to the legislators, the state, as you have seen what is taking place in South Carolina. And that is our position on those matters at this time. If anyone have any questions on what I have already stated, there are a lot of other avenues that we will pursue, but we would prefer to give the city the opportunity to rectify this problem without having to pursue those other avenues. And leaving this again, I want to remind you again of one statement in here. Who will be liable for a hate song being displayed on city property? We have not asked for Jim Crow reparations in the city of Danville. We have not asked for the reparations for past injuries to our African American citizens. As I drove around this week and observed—
Excuse me, sir, respectfully, are you getting close?
Yes, yes. As I drove around this week and observed our statistics that we have gathered, we found that less people in the city of Danville displayed the Confederate flag than the American flag. So the majority of our citizens in this city, we feel, have the same feeling we have. So we're here to express that concern. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a copy that I want to share with you of the statement that we made prior when we were here.
The city clerk, please.
Yes, city clerk. And I hope I have a copy. It's 9 city council people. There were 9 people killed in South Carolina. If each one of the council persons tonight will remember the 9,
Mr. King,
and will vote, one vote each for the 9.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Welcome, sir. Your name, please?
My name is Tyler C. Milner, and I come as one person to share a bit of information that you may find enlightening relative to the counsel that has been provided you by your attorney. I respectfully realize that the attorney tells the client whatever he thinks it ought to be. That's what an attorney does. But he does that on the basis of the law and certain stipulations of the law. And so I come to just point out several pieces, no doubt you have or you have not, but I think if the attorney would either change his position or consider himself enlightened and say, I made an error, and thereby advise counsel that you have all the authority to take down the flag, a lot of grief, a lot of activity can be avoided. And I go back to the resolution of September the 6th, 1994, where the city accepted the donation from the association. And in the final paragraph of that resolution, it says, the Heritage Preservation Association shall be responsible for the purchase, removal, and the replacement of the flag flown over the monument. The flag flown over the monument, which by law and technicality, the flag is not the monument nor a part of the monument based on the resolution that was approved by council. The flag removal, see, if it was permanent and part of the monument, it couldn't be removed. Flag removal by the association shall be disposed of by the association as he deemed appropriate. If the flag is part of the monument and it should be there forever, how can one party be given the right to both take it there and dispose of it, and if it's part of the monument? Clearly, by council's own resolution, the flag is not part of the monument. And then it says, access to the monument for the removal and the replacement of the flag is to be coordinated with the city superintendent of buildings and grounds. Now, if the flag is part of the monument and therefore permanent, why do you need to meet with the superintendent of grounds to move the flag? That's why I think the city attorney just misapplied the law. This is the law. Then I also read the state law, which also is being used to say why you can't take the flag down. Nowhere in that do they state anything about the flag. They say erect. Well, you don't erect the flag. You erect something solid, granite, marble or something. You are not to disturb that. That is the monument that they're talking about. So if you take the flag off the property, you're not disturbing the monument. And then you say you can't do that. Well, then how can the association do that? Go in and out with permission of the superintendent of grounds. So I would suggest that if the attorney chooses not to modify his counsel, I hope that the council will exercise its authority and do what is appropriate. Clearly, this country and this nation has been given certainty by nothing that anybody would be pleased with.
Respectfully,
Yes.
getting close.
Yes, a great moment to correct all that it had not been corrected before now, and I don't think the city of Danville would like to be a holdout.
Thank you.
Mayor, I missed the address. What was his address?
I'm sorry?
What, the name and address of the speaker?
Mr. Tyler C. Milner was the name. I didn't write the address down. Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Yes. Your name, please?
My name is Royce A.G., lifelong resident of Danville, and I don't plan on leaving. In reference to the aforementioned contract, Resolution 9491, dated September 6, 1994, concerning the flag flying from the monument, the number 4, the last paragraph, the Heritage Preservation Association shall be responsible for the purchase, removal, and replacement of the flag. The unwritten part in here has to do with the flag will deteriorate over time because it's cloth and it needs to be replaced. Is it going to get tattered like the American flag? Has to be replaced from time to time. That's the answer to that. And I'm going to be under 5 minutes. The original part having to do with the museum's contract gives them till 2023, but it also mentions in there, the latter part of it, having to do with between amicable agreement between the council and the museum. They can leave if they want to. And being they having such trouble with history, they're doing pretty good with the art, but they're having trouble with the history part. And they can't remember between this year and last year. They can't remember between this year and 20 years ago or 100 years ago. 100 years ago happened to be 1912 when the United Daughters Confederacy saved the whole project up there by raising $20,000. And they got the room up there in perpetuity. That brings me to the other thing having to do with the, thank you. That has to do with the Code of Virginia. It's Title 15.2, Counties, Cities, and Towns. Cut to the chase and cut to the bottom line. It starts with 1622. It goes all the way to the Gulf War. But a locality may within the geographical limits of the city authorize and permit the erection of monuments or memorials. And so in the middle part there, you shall not mess with Confederate or Northern Civil War memorials. And the placement of Union markings or Confederate markings. Governing body may appropriate a sufficient sum of money out of its funds to completely aid the erection of monuments, which that was contained in this other one. It shall but not be removed or messed with or bothered with. Gentlemen, you can't raise an army if the people you're trying to raise an army from look back and see how you treat the war memorials from the past people that was into armies. And the Code of Virginia has included both sides because they wanted the South to rejoin the Union after the war. And we're under the code, so this deja vu all over again. Last year it was the law. The law is still there. The world has turned. The poles have not switched. We're still geographically in the South. So think about that. Do you want to violate the law again? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir, your name?
My name is Frank Harvey. I'm with the Virginia Division of Sons of Confederate Veterans, Camp 828, the Pennsylvania Vindicators. Our purpose is to support and have an affirmative message of our Confederate heritage. We're a nonpartisan organization with a strong heritage preservation focus. Our purpose is to honor and care for our Confederate soldiers and sailors' graves. Confederate sites and monuments display flags and Southern symbols, all as if a sign of honor to our Confederate heritage and cultural diversity. When Confederate issues come under attack, we express our thoughts and opinions through honorable means. This was done when we spent 3 years to secure the Virginia State issued flag with the trademarked SCV logo. This was eventually granted and became a state law. We've worked with legislators to craft bills to honor and protect Confederate heritage, monuments, graves, battlefields, and other historical artifacts. Confederate heritage should always receive equal treatment in all issues before the law. Our First Amendment rights should not be eliminated through a false accusation connected with a violent act. The SCV in no way condones violence, racism, or the use of Confederate symbols in acts of bigotry, hatred, or racism. To call for the revocation of the state-issued SCV logo or the removal of the third national flag off of the Sutherland Mansion grounds is a travesty. To further react and allude to the violent acts of a deranged individual somehow related to this heritage organization is unacceptable. To suppress our First Amendment rights should be a wake-up call to all citizens of the United States. This is not what our country is in favor of. Murderous acts of a deranged, crazed, disturbed individual in South Carolina is unacceptable. This individual was not a member of the SCV. He was a demonic individual who should have been identified prior to this outrageous act, as if it felt he had behaviors of violence in the past. Hatred, racism, somebody must have seen it before. We call on all Americans to take a time to reflect, to pray, and to use common sense before reacting to a knee-jerk response. This country did not become the greatest country on earth by this type of reaction or suppression. Systematically censoring a large portion of our nation is not the answer. We call on our elected officials to stand firm in protecting the rights of all Americans. No revision of Southern heritage will change the Southern mantra. Our Confederate symbols must never be used as a sign of war, hate, or dividedness. May God bless the South. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would speak? Yes, ma'am. Your name, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Carolyn LaVicount. I reside at 144 Hamilton Street here in Danville. And I, just very briefly, I'm an American and proud of it. And want to see preserved First Amendment rights of each and every one of us. The reality is the Sutherland Mansion is a Confederate memorial. It is a Southern heritage memorial. For us being the citizens of the city of Danville, to try to maintain that Confederate memorial as our city museum is simply ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I have no problem whatsoever with maintenance and preservation of Southern heritage for those citizens who wish to honor that heritage. However, what we have here in Danville is a city-owned property. I understand the sacrifices and the work done by the ladies who raised the money to get that. Then it was given to the city, and the city takes care of, the city maintains it. Our dollars, even if you don't pay property taxes, you pay a utility bill. Our utilities, money is taken and goes into the general fund, which is used to pay the city's bills. Now, notwithstanding that I don't want to in any way violate anyone else's First Amendment rights, nor do I want mine violated. This museum is property of and representative of the city of Danville, all of its citizens. My heritage is not the same as many others in this room. I'm an African American. I grew up here in Danville. I grew up under Jim Crow. I grew up under two counters in the Woolworths and closed down the city park rather than have African Americans come in there. I grew up under that. I grew up with knowledge of the Klan and others like them who fly under that flag. What you see when you look at that flag is based on your heritage, your conditioning, your life history, your reading of history. I see hatred, I see racism, and I know for a surety that many others do also. And I understand, I would disavow any individual who acted in the way that that individual acted in South Carolina. But it is a reality that those who harbor those kinds of views, the hatred of minorities, the racism, they wrap themselves in the Confederate flag. I'm not going to say why or how, but it is a reality. Several months ago, in the Danville Register, there was an editorial. What they suggested was that the city of Danville sell the museum. I would love to see the historic preservation people take that Sutherland Mansion and do with it as you will, and let us go on with a city facility which reflects the city of Danville and its publicly perceived positions, views, its progressiveness, its future. We shouldn't be down here arguing about this, okay? When South Africa had to take a step back from apartheid, the number one thing that it had to do was divest. Those of you, may remember that. They got rid of the blood-stained banners of their past. And that's what we're asking you to do today. Get rid of the blood-stained banner.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Come on. Okay.
Okay, good evening. My name is Sheila Baines.
Good evening.
And I live at 182 Charles Street in Danville. I, too, agree with what Carolyn LeViscount just said to you. And I've thought about this many times as I have driven to work and home from work 5 days a week, and I ride by the flag and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking this is representative of our city. The city as a whole, not the city as a part. Why are we flying a flag that divides us as a nation, as a city, as a country, when we can be flying a flag that unites us, the flag of the United States of America? We need to unite and not to divide. And there are a lot of citizens in this city that do not see the flag as something that unites us, but as something that divides us and reminds us of a time that we do not ever want to have come again. And it reminds us and many people who lived through that time period of things that happened that we don't want it to be forgotten. Like I say, it is history. And I believe history has its place. But I do not think that a flag, which is a symbol of a time period when we fought against our own people, is something that we want to have flying on our streets every day in our city. I think it divides again and does not unite. And I want to ask you to be brave. You're in a time now when all over this country, the talk about this flag is going on. It is city-owned property. As members of council and representatives of our city, you have a responsibility to do what is good for the citizens in your city. And I believe that if you had a referendum on it, took a vote, that the majority of the citizens in the city would say they would rather not have the flag outside on a monument. They would rather have it placed inside with other historical items from that period, in a place where it belongs, in a place where it can be recognized for the history, for what it was, for the time period, and for everything that has happened in the past. There was something that I read, and it's Carolyn just happened to be the one that wrote a letter that was in a newspaper recently. And I read the letter and I thought about it, and I'm like, I can understand this, and I'm sure she's not the only one that feels this way. But when I read the words that she wrote, I could see it in my mind. And I understand, I'm old enough to remember the days where you had to ride in the back of the bus. And I think about the people that went to Woolworths, sit down at that stand to sit down and eat. Can you imagine how brave they were and how hard that was for them to do that? But sometimes people do stand up and they do the right things. But this is what I read, and this is why I'm going to ask you, that I want you to take the time to study this. Do what you have to do the right thing, the thing that's best for the entire city. Not one part. No one's saying forget it ever happened, hide it away. Put it where it belongs. Don't have it where it does not belong. But this is what I read. She's talking about a time when she was in this room and saw flags flying around, borne by those, and this is what came into her mind, borne by those that would come in the night to bomb, shoot, and burn in their beds, those who had the temerity to stand for black equality in this country. There are a lot of African Americans in this country that remember those days. There are a lot of whites in this country that remember those days. And many of us regret that they ever happened. So I hope that we as Danvillians will think about this and what it means to people when they think about those days and consider doing what is right. And in closing, I would, and I think it's incumbent upon you as members of council to make it known how each of you feel on this issue. Elections are coming up. People need to know where you stand, what you support, who you are, and that's part of who you are, what you do and what you decide to do. And I hope you'd be willing to share with people exactly how you see this issue. Not the legal side of it, but just whether or not it's something that's good for Danville and its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yes, sir. And your name, please.
Glenn Scares. Pardon the cane, I'm recovering from complications from some recent surgery. I'm just speaking for myself. The first item that I'd like to talk with you about is how Danville is spending money and the millions of dollars for projects that shouldn't require anywhere near that kind of funding. You want to build a parking deck downtown, estimated at $12 million. It's going to be worth more than downtown. And that's not even the full estimate. You want to make it look like the old Burton Hotel. You could have built the hotel for $12 million, but you're building supposedly. Once things get started, if you guys were trying to build an outhouse down by the river trail, by the time you were done, it would be Mount Vernon on the river, and it would cost $10 million because stuff keeps getting added to it. For some reason or another, you guys just forget the project that started out as being something reasonable. The firehouse. Langston School is a waste of money, big time. This GW track, by the time it's done, you will have built the Coliseum. Because somebody's going to say, hey, the more we add to it, the more we do this, the more we do that, boy, we're going to get all kinds of people in here. Well, I don't know about that, but you're breaking me. My real estate values are going down because nobody wants to come to Danville. I would leave if I could get out, but I can't sell a house for enough to buy somewhere else. You gotta stop spending money like it's water. And here recently, there's been a couple of calls for disclosure of how much money Danville actually owes. And I would personally like to see a full disclosure of how much money Danville personally owes. Now, I know you got this regional foundation, but I believe, isn't that the money that came from the hospital when they sold it without asking anybody whether they wanted to sell it or not? So technically that's sort of our money, but it's doled out on different projects. And I won't go into all the fun and games with its tobacco commission. But you guys are supposedly the most intelligent people here in town. Otherwise you wouldn't have this job. You've got to understand that you can't spend money this way. Danville doesn't have it, and it has no means of getting it. It's becoming extremely upsetting to me that every time I pick up the newspaper, I see another extravagant firehouse, extravagant parking garage, more money spent on downtown Danville, and apparently this other group there, the ones who do have the money from the hospital, want to hire a company. This is another thing you do too. You always hire an expert to tell you what you should do. Got an idea, GW's track. You could have probably paved the track for less than you're paying the people to tell you that you could pave the track. But why not make them earn it? If something needs to be done at GW, by golly, how about let's ask them to improve their scores? Let's get the school on a better foundation, and then they can go run around out on a track. Seems to me they should be able to earn the privilege of playing sports. I'd rather see them in the classroom right now until our academic scores get better. And that goes for every school here in Danville. One other thing. The situation in South Carolina. It was tragic. We had a situation here in Danville just a few weeks ago. Also extremely tragic. I haven't heard one word from our police department or our newspaper about how they're handling that particular situation. But the folks of Danville handled it the way I expected them to. They did it quietly, they did it respectfully, and they did it the way the Southern people have always done it. Let the police department do their work. The folks in South Carolina.
Respectfully, sir, are you getting close?
I'm sorry?
Respectfully, are you getting close?
Oh yes, very close. The people in South Carolina handled that situation in the same way I would expect any Southerner to handle that situation. But I think it so shocked America that they didn't burn down the town that we're getting a little overzealous in our desire to reward those folks for doing basically what I expected them to do. We're all Southerners, and this country is going socialist. Most of it already is. The South is the last remaining bastion of godly people who respect each other, work with each other. The people in this room, both black and white, if you look around, they seem like they've done pretty good together. I don't believe...
Are you finished, sir?
Yes. Just one other thing. God bless the South.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Susan Wilson. I live in Danville, and I'm very happy to be in Danville. I think it's a fantastic place. There are just a couple things that I think we could improve on. One of the things I think we could improve on is that we could not only respect the heritage of those people whose ancestors lived here and prospered, but also the ancestors of those people who were enslaved. I think that it is extremely disrespectful to have a symbol of a war. Then there can be lots of debate on why the war was fought, and who said this and who said that. But if we realize that most recently 9 people were murdered, and the symbol that was used in that murder was this Confederate flag, and it is used that way on an ongoing basis. To have that flag on a city building, a city that is maintained, a building maintained by the city, is really sad. It is not something, I think, that represents Danville in the best possible light. I don't think it is something that encourages people who are not Southerners to come to Danville. I think when we talk about economic development, we want to have this as an open, accepting city. I don't believe this flag does that. I believe that there are many ways that we could consider the flag. What the exact regulations were, I don't know. What the exact law is, I don't know. But I do know there's a courthouse, and there are people who are hiring others called attorneys who discuss what the merits of this law is and what the interpretation is. And that's an ongoing thing, and I would respectfully ask that the interpretation is researched, that we ask the state if that's necessary, that we look into other avenues if necessary, that it is a building owned, maintained, whatever, by the city, that it seems like it should come down. And then we should consider some of the reasons to what happens when it doesn't come down. We remain one of the few places that has a Confederate flag proudly waving. Is that what we want to show ourselves as? Or do we want to go to the effort to see if it can be removed? Do we want to honor only the population that was privileged, that remains privileged? Do we want to remind other people of color that they have a troubled past which was thrust upon them, and instead of honoring them, to keep reminding them of what their ancestors had to undergo? What is it that we want? And then let us also consider, when we're talking about economic development, do we want to actually put the city of Danville in the same place that the county of Pittsylvania was? Do we want to have ourselves at one side of a suit where we will lose? Do we want to pay the opposing attorney's bills? Do we want to pay tens of thousands or more? Is this what we want for our city? And I think that it would be really helpful if the city council would consider everything that was said today. There were many each person had something helpful and positive to say, but I think thinking about how we present Danville, that we want to be accepting, open, we want to honor all, that we might find a better symbol, possibly the U.S. flag, to be flying. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am. Your name, please.
Good evening. Brenda Cardwell Lewis. My address is 607 Claiborne Street. I want you to know that 66 years ago, I was born right here in Danville, Virginia. I got a superb education through the Danville Public School System, graduating in 1966 from John M. Langston High School, Go Lions. And I have recently retired after working too many years for me to know about. And my decision was to return to Danville. So a few years back, I bought a little house, and I've been paying taxes on it, and now I'm retired, so I'm ready to move in it. And my sole purpose for returning to Danville was to give to this city what it had given to me, which was a wonderful, wonderful life I've had. And this opportunity to speak before you as council members, I could not pass up, because I want you to know that that flag that we're talking about, the Confederate flag, has meant for me a symbol of hatred for more years than I care to remember. It did not start with the murders in South Carolina. It did not start when I read history of the Civil War. It started in particular when we had the demonstrations in the 1960s in Danville, and that flag was used to beat us over our backs as a symbol of hatred. Now, I do know that some people don't mind that flag. They don't feel like I feel when I see that flag. And for them, it's history, and I think it should be preserved as history in a museum. But I certainly do not think it should be flying, and especially I do not think that our taxes, those taxes that I am willing to pay, should be used to maintain anything that has that flag on it. So I wanted to encourage the city council members to make their positions known so that we can know how you feel about it. And I want to encourage those people who love the flag to continue to love it if that's what they love. I don't love it. And you cannot make me love that flag ever. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else would speak? Oh, yes, sir.
I've almost sat here in disbelief to hear the same old rhetoric we were hearing 20 years ago. The Confederate flag is the racist flag and Old Glory is the hero, and it ain't so. Little Southern lingo there. This is cultural genocide. They are trying to wipe us out subtle as they can. I am proud of my ancestors, and I'm proud that they marched off against a tyrannical federal government who used slavery to cover up their real deeds and schemes. What about the Indian nations? What would Red Cloud and Geronimo think of the U.S. flag? I know they thought a heck of a lot more about had more respect for the Confederate flag. You had the 5 civilized tribes that were fighting for the Confederacy. Blacks fought in Confederate armies. We got a book out now with 1,600 documents on this issue. And I'm tired of hearing these civil rights leaders sit there and point their finger at the Confederate flag and say, it's the bad guy, it's the bad guy. Well, it's not. This is, as I said before, it's cultural genocide. You are trying to wipe us out. When we put a flag in a museum, it doesn't stay there. It's gone. And talking about education, these kids are being brainwashed to a New England myth. And I'm tired of it. I'm proud of my ancestors and what they did to fight against Emperor Abraham. One thing about it, though, you must know, we're not going away. We're not going to go into that sweet good night. We're going to stand our ground and we're going to fight for what's right and our side of the story. We'll march with our banners. We'll march with the Southern truth, which is dangerous to the existing order. You ask a kid now who General Lee is. He doesn't even know. And to hear these people over here, I invited a certain civil rights leader 5 years ago to get together with us and have a forum, and he wouldn't do it. And then I had a councilman on the council, wanted me to come to speak at a prayer breakfast down in Bible Way, and I told him I was doing it. I never heard from him. This, as I said, is cultural genocide. We have the right to fly that flag down. Which flag flew over the slave ships and legalized slavery for 87 years? It was Old Glory. And if we could have a seance and bring Red Cloud back, I wonder what he would say about the U.S. flag. I'm tired of hearing this junk that flag needs to go. A lot of these people don't sound like they're from around here. And I'm willing to defend that flag to the end. And if anybody in here wants to take me on a debate, bring it on. We'll do it next meeting. We'll get the mayor to put on a striped shirt and a whistle and let him referee. But this stuff about the Confederate flag shouldn't fly. We have a viewpoint too, and people are not listening to us. And I'm sure that you know that flag at the museum jumped off the flagpole, caught a ride down to South Carolina, shot those people, and came back. The biggest crime of all is they brushed those dead souls under the bus and went after anything Confederate. And I'm sick and tired of people picking on my history. It has the right to survive just like that slaver's flag up at the museum. Let it fly. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Robert Lovelace. You know, I was listening to MSNBC News, how they commended the cities that went on and took the flag down with no hesitation. I always hear council members saying that we want Danville to grow, we want Danville to flourish. Front page of this makes people not want to come. We need to consider this and consider it wisely. I'm not saying take your history, throw it in the trash can. It's a way of doing everything. I don't want to forget my history. I was born on a milk dairy. Every so often, I would take my daughter and my grandchildren back to that old milk dairy, walk through the woods and look at that old rundown shack that we used to live in. And I would tell them, don't never forget where you come from. But to hold it up in my face when you have insulted me with it, it's like pouring salt on a fresh wound. Danville wants to grow. We don't want this foolishness, really, it's foolishness that we are going through now. We want people to see Danville as a city of love, a city of unity, a city of brotherly love. This is what we want to exhibit if we want Danville to move forward, not back into the past. I remember when, after Woolworths, how we had the little cubby hut, I call it a little cubby hut, wearing that black suit have to go and eat. True, I want to remember that because I want to know where I come from so I'll make sure that I don't end up back there again. See, a lot of the time we get up and we forget where we come from and we slip right on back. Are we slipping back, Danville? Are we really slipping back? What was the flag that was flying when they was fighting to keep slavery? The flag that went in front of the soldiers that was trying to abolish slavery. What was that flag? What color was that flag? I remember it. I remember riding on the back seat of the bus. I remember getting up out of my seat and standing on the back of the bus in order for someone else to sit down. I remember all of that. But for you to take it and I'm going to smear it in your face. Remember your history. Remember your history. But let's do it decent and in order. God bless you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Beverly Bartholomew. I grew up in this town also. My heritage Native American also. How many Native Americans do you see around here? Well, I don't think the flag should be taken down based on ignorance. And that's what it is. One person, well, several people that had that ignorance use that flag in the wrong way. But they do not know their history. None of us in here know our history. I hate to say that. Because you will see to this day that you have African Americans supporting the flag. You need to see what they went through. You need to study your history before you make this judgment. That building is history. It's in the South. And it was there during that war. And you should teach your children all of your history and be honest about the whole history. Do an in-depth study on this flag. Do an in-depth study on this history. I hate to say it, but our education system is not very good. It leaves out a lot of important things. It breaks my heart that we, as a nation, base things on a flag. That flag, like he said, do not kill those people. You cannot help by their judgment, but also you have that flag that flies. How many years you speak of how many years you have lived here in Danville. That flag has been there. But you know what? You need to show them people that that flag can stand. And the people do get along here. How often do you see in Danville that black and white going against one another? Seriously? How many can raise their hand and tell me black and white going against each other in Danville? We live together in harmony, and we can show everyone else in the United States that that flag, and we in the South, we're living in the South, blacks and whites. Whites aren't the only ones that owned slaves. It was black people also. They sold their own people to make money. They sold their own people. Right there from Africa. Study your history.
Please address counsel if you would.
I know, but study your history. Don't say it's a black and white thing, because it's not. It's not just that. I have Native American in me. I have no rights. My ancestors have no rights. And I don't have no right to say what they went through. I don't say I suffered. You have no idea what your ancestors went through. You weren't there. The black people did go through slavery, but it was your ancestors that went through it, not you. We are making progress, but you can make progress flying that flag and still saying, this is not what it's about. You know? Please don't take away something that's history. Give people knowledge, not ignorance. Don't have everything taken away, but study it first. Don't base it on ignorance. That's all I ask.
Thank you. Anyone else would speak?
My name is Katie Whitehead. I live in Pennsylvania County. I appreciate that you may choose to discuss the flag during your work session. Two questions seem central to any discussion. One is whether the majority of City Council considers the Confederate national flag flying on city property appropriate and beneficial. If the majority of council would like to remove the flag, the second question is how you might do that with, and at the same time avoid expensive litigation. At no cost, you can ask for the opinion of the Virginia Attorney General. At no cost, you can accept your city attorney's opinion and ask your legislators to change the law, which is seen as restricting your actions. There needn't be significant litigation cost. On a slightly different note, the Sutherland Mansion, in its current use as occupied by the Danville Museum of Fine Arts and History, I do not see it as a memorial to Southern heritage or the Confederacy. And I would encourage any of you, anyone listening, to see the current exhibits, 2 exhibits, one on slavery, an exhibit on loan from the museum in Richmond, and a second one created for Danville that includes some Danville history, an exhibit focused on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor and Vice Mayor to the City Council. I want to share, when I was in Korea,
your name, please?
James Stewart.
Thank you.
That's the Mount Carmel Baptist Church here in Danville. When I served in Korea, before going to Korea, we were taught, if you take territory, you plant your flag. My point is, the Confederate, they lost the war. Why do we have to stick with that when they lost the war? I served in Korea and seen a lot of things like that happen. If we took territory, we put the American flag up. That was indicative that we were ruling that particular land. That's wanted to share that with you, and may the Lord bless all of you real good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
Cecil Bridgewater, the city of Danville for 39 years. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I fought under the Stars and Stripes. And when I came back home, I was glad to see the American flag flying. Right is right, even if no one does it. Right is still right. And wrong is wrong, even if everyone does it. Wrong is still wrong. Until we begin to stop doing wrong, then we can't do what's right. We ask so much of you all. We demand so much of you all. And we believe tonight that you're going to do what's right for the city. We know that industry want to come here. And some of them see what's flying, change their mind. That's the truth. But we have done you all injustice, because as you all try to bring industry in here, we do not give you all an adequate workforce. Even the governor said that. He look out for us, Southside, and when the companies come, we don't have the workforce for the companies that are coming. We need to know from you, what can we do as citizens of Danville, Pennsylvania County, and wherever this meeting is broadcast, what can we do to help you do a better job in bringing industry here? Because if we don't have a workforce, your efforts are all in vain. How can you bring high-tech industry in here when we don't have high-tech personnel to work? What can we do with the school system? How can we make the school system better that when seniors graduate, they're not graduating but social promotion, but they're being graduated because they have earned the right to graduate. That they have the zeal and desire to go to DCC or Avery or any other higher learning institutions. What can we do? What can churches do? What can communities do to make sure that we give you an adequate workforce, that when industry look at us, they will not see a Confederate flag that says, we're all working together, but we can agree to fly the flag. But I did not fight. I did not put my life on the line under the Confederate flag. I fought for the United States of America. And in God, we trust. So, what can we do to help you do your job, to bring industry and jobs into our area? We need an adequate workforce so that we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Larry Wilburn, Danville, and Pennsylvania County. Been here for 45 years, and as Ed Clark would say, you're not from around here, are you? And sometimes I still feel that way. But a lot has been said about heritage. And for the most part, I think it's a collective heritage of the South. And I would just take a few minutes and share my private and personal heritage from having grown up, been born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. Particularly my mother was the one that transferred to me the history of the Confederacy. General Sherman was someone to be cursed. Robert E. Lee was someone to be praised. He was an angel, Sherman was the devil. We went over to Monument Avenue, and some of you have been to Monument Avenue and seen the heroes of the Confederacy. I am ashamed to say that the N-word was used often in my family. When I came to Danville in '69 as a teacher at George Washington High School, I carried with me that heritage, some would say baggage, and I went into a situation which the following year integration was enforced in the schools. I did not know anything about the history of Danville, the racial history of Danville. I came in eyes closed, very naive, didn't know what was going on. But when that integration occurred, that's when I saw a different heritage coming forth. A heritage of hatred. Somewhat similar to mine and my family. But it was through that movement of integration and that different view of heritage that I started to examine things differently. Now let's flash forward here to the flag situation. Yes, it does represent a certain heritage. And yes, I think each one of us has to stand up and say, it's my personal heritage, and elaborate upon that. For me, I've already explained part of my heritage. When I was in grade school, in 5th grade, we used to reenact the Civil War, and I would carry the Confederate flag into battle against those expletive-deleted Yankees. But I can't think like that anymore. Some people say the white hair has pulled the brain cells out. And that may be true, but I can't look at the flag like I used to and expect different results. I think it would be as difficult as it is on both sides. I think it would be to the benefit of the city and to the citizens of the city and the county to remove the flag. My personal heritage would paraphrase something like President Reagan would say and say, Mr. City Council, take down that flag. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Anyone else?
If I was a good public speaker, I would be a politician.
took a few notes. 3 weeks ago,
And your name, please? Your name?
Tony Lundy. I think we can all agree that 3 weeks ago, a horrible thing happened.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Okay. 3 weeks ago, a horrible thing happened. I think we can all agree. And the person that did that should have been took out in the town square and strung up. But instead, the media, politicians, and our illustrious museum director decided to exploit the tragedy for political gain. Shame on them all. Out of honor and respect, for 1 week, for the most part, our heritage groups decided to remain silent, to not fight back, to turn the other cheek, to let everyone come after us and show. We said, let's show the world who has the hate and who's the good neighbors. We were the good neighbors. We sat back and took a bashing until the funerals were over and the memorials were over, because we felt like those families deserved a little peace and not to be thrown into the middle of a national debate over the flag. They should have been shown a little more respect. That was how we felt. We waited until the memorials were over, and then we started fighting back. And fight back we have. Flags are starting to come back up now. Today, or last night in Florida, Marion County, Florida, there was a unanimous vote to put the flag back up. They decided they had made a knee-jerk response, and they had done the wrong thing, and they voted unanimous to put it back up. The flags in Dalton, Georgia are now up. There are other places that are now voting that have took them down to put them back up. There was also in the CNN poll, a national poll, and we're not talking about of southern states or conservative areas. CNN's, by anybody's accounts, a pretty left-wing news channel. And they polled their people nationwide, and that includes California, New York, Chicago, everywhere, by a 2-to-1 majority. The people of this country said that that flag is a symbol of Southern pride, and it's not a symbol of hate. And I say once again, during the last 3 weeks, I haven't heard any hatred from our people. I've seen our people angry. I've seen our people upset. If your ancestors, if your family was being attacked, would you be upset? Well, our family and a lot of the people in here's family is being attacked. And it is hatred. It's full of vitriol. Reverend Pinckney, the senator, was also a senator. He was one of the 9 that was killed. He voted for the compromise that put that flag back up where it's at in South Carolina right now. He voted for the compromise that put that flag where it's at in South Carolina. He was a man of peace. And I want to say to the people, some people in the media, and some politicians, and some other people in this town, quit stirring up racial division, strife, and hate. We've got along for 20 years. We've had very little problems in this city, except for a little bit last fall when they brought this up. Other than that, we have not had any issues in this city. And we've been the best neighbors over here. I guarantee you, if the folks on this side of the fence needed help and would come to us and ask for help, these people would do it. They would be good friends and good neighbors, and we are good friends and good neighbors. We just want to live in peace. We don't want our heritage attacked, and we're not attacking anybody else's. People say, museum, put it in a museum. Well, it's at a museum. And in Lexington, it was in a museum, flying over Robert E. Lee's tomb. And they took it down there, it was in a museum. So it doesn't matter whether it's flying over a state house. It doesn't matter whether it's flying over a museum or inside a museum. People want it down and gone. And once it's in the museum, it'll be derogatory. And I'll try to wrap up and be brief. I know. People of this city, I want to say to you, we better stick together. The people of the city better stick together. We don't need to fight over the flag. That flag has very, very honorable meanings to many of us. And we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're willing to be friends and neighbors. But there are people in this country. There are people in Washington. There are people that want to take down our history and our heritage, our statues, our symbols. Next, they want to come after our churches. They'll challenge the tax exempt status in your church if you don't do what they tell you to do in the coming years. And watch. And it's not only that, they're not even willing to protect our borders. We have an enemy overseas, ISIS, that brags, they boast that they have cells in all 50 states. In Blaine County, Virginia, they have an installation up there. And our government does nothing about it. The people here better stand together because they're after our Confederate flag, yes, but they're also after that flag right there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Samuel Shelton. I was born here in Danville, right across the river, right above the railroad track. We were, as the black comedian said, we were not poor, we were poor. And never have been anybody, not now and probably never will be, but Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And I'm Southern. That's two things I can count on. And the scripture says, and for those people who are, whether they are self-anointed ministers or whatever they are, they know the scripture. You're going to serve one master or the other. You'll be a slave to sin or you'll be a slave to Christ. Get used to it. That's what we have to do. That's what we was put here on this earth to do, is to serve Him. Now, as far as industry, I don't remember exactly when it was because I wasn't around. But Dan River Mills came here. And I don't think that there was a monument that the HPA had never put up, and there wasn't a flag on that monument that had never been put up. So I don't think that that was an issue at the time. However, I'm sure Dan River Mills knew that this was the last capital of the Confederacy. They knew where they was coming to. Same thing just like Goodyear. Been there, done that. And I can tell you, they knew exactly where they was coming to. Why? Because they needed people that would work. Not people that will go around complaining and whine and moan. Yeah, oh yeah, the whiners and moaners follow. But the thing is, industry doesn't have a problem with coming here because of those things. It may be because of drug use, maybe because people don't want to work, they can't get them to stay on the job. They have problems with a lot of other things, but it's not that about whether it's a flag, Confederate flag, or the former flag of the slave trade. But what it is that they are looking for, like I said, for people that will work. And when you have people come here, distant, came and went, it's nothing. Is just like Jesus said, the moth, rust, and whatever, it goes. But there's something about that heritage thing. It's in my veins, it's in my DNA. I got a kind of strange heritage anyway. See, I'm English, Irish, Scottish, Pennsylvania Dutch, Cherokee Indian. I believe I'm colored. Well, you know what? That is still the fact that I'm Southern over all of that. That is a part of me that can stand here and tell you that it is great to be Southern. You don't have to go changing attitudes. It's built in. You don't have to go be, you go to someone, a doctor or somebody, and they try to redo something. To be Southern is a wonderful thing. And we should embrace that. Like I said, people are watching. And with the media and everything, I don't have all that stuff now, the smartphones and that, I don't need it. But there are people that watch. They know what you do. They're very well aware of what you do. And if you don't make issues about things, that's what scares your industries away. When they see people that, ooh, this bothers me. Oh, I can't stand that. They want people that works, not people that whine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you very much. Mr. Campbell?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes, please.
On the floor, please. Thank you, sir. I'd like to say good evening to all of my constituents.
Good evening.
Mayor, city manager, to all the councilmen. Indeed, it's an honor for me to be able to stand before council and also to speak to the citizens of Danville. Today at 4 o'clock, I got a call from the chief of police asking that he would immediately meet with me. I was out of town in the big city of Yanceyville, so I told him I would be there in half an hour, and we got together. The chief said to me that there was a package on me and that it's very damaging and it would be exposed. Also, there may be danger if I would stand before you tonight and voice my opinion. The information that the chief gave me, I'd like to pass it out to council, Mr. Mayor, if it's all right with you. I am a PK kid. I don't profess to have lived a perfect life. And in fact, anyone else here who have lived a perfect life, will you please stand? I would appreciate it, because I like to know who you are. The chief advised me that for my family to be cautious and just be very, very watchful. I don't want to be a martyr for anybody or any danger to come upon anybody, but Jesus already died and paid the price for us to have eternal life. I would like to read some of this briefly, then I get into what I want to say. This is the Virginia Fusion Center. Since the chief of police has given to this, I got with some of my constituents, and they looked up online what are some of the agencies that's involved with this organization. And they list the Virginia State Police, Virginia National Guard, Homeland Security.
Excuse me, Mr. Campbell, just to make sure that I'm clear, you are releasing this information freely? Or?
I'm freely, because I personally feel if it's a warning to me, it could be a warning to any council person. And I just want to personally bring it on the floor and express my mind. The Virginia Fusion Center has observed a viral open source that 3 subjects in Virginia have been identified as potential targets for activities in relation to perceived injustices involving hatred, violence, or vandalism towards Southern people, their heritage, their monuments, and their heroes. The subjects who made this statement viral online video have identified themselves as members of anonymous CSA activist movement and claim to be working toward exposing those who excite violence, division, and hatred concerning the Confederate flag. The list of names identified as Anderson Thomas. There are 3 subjects identified. Number 1 is Councilman L.G. Campbell Jr. of Danville. Number 2 is Joseph Winding of Richmond, Virginia. Number 3 is Superintendent John Henson of Fredericksburg. This is the 21st century of white knight riders. Statement made in this video suggests that above subjects may be targeted, viral the release of a personal and sensitive information if they continue to oppose the Confederate battle flag and or commit other acts perceived as opposing Southern heritage. As you can tell right now, I'm not sitting down, I'm standing up. For me to address, first of all, I'd like to say or talk about the law. It's Virginia Code 15-2, and I would summarize a lot of it. -1812, memorials for war veterans. The locality may, within their geography limits of their locality, authorize and permit the erection of monuments or memorials for any war or conflict, or for any engagement of such war or conflict. To include the following monuments or memorial, we have the French Indian War, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, Confederate Union monuments or memorials, Operation Enduring Freedom, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War. If such are erected, it shall be unlawful for authorities of the locality or any other person or persons to disturb or interfere with any of the monuments or memorials, to erect or to prevent its citizens from taking proper measurements and exercising proper means for the protection, preservation, and care of the same. I stand before you tonight because many of the citizens of Danville feel that the Confederate flag should be removed from flying and placed in the museum in a showcase. Flags show an alliance. There were passed laws that were unjust and unlawful. For example, the Doctrine Percy versus Ferguson decision of 1896, it was unfair and an unjust law which allowed the state-sponsored segregation, and they came up with the ideology of separate but equal. Here, even within the city of Danville, white schools passed their used books to black schools when they received new books. The football team received used equipment after the white schools received new equipment. The doctrine was overturned by a series of Supreme Court decisions, starting with Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. There was a law that blacks had to sit in the back of the bus, but there was an amendment to change that law. There was a law enforcing separate restrooms and water fountains for blacks and whites. This was unjust and unfair. It was amended and the law was changed. Our point is council should have the power to amend the law by sending a resolution to Richmond to have control over the issues in their localities. The South Carolina Senate voted on Monday to remove the Confederate flag from a pole on the State House grounds, though the proposal still needs approval from the State House and the governor. The bill required 2/3 votes in the chamber. The Senate approved it by a 37-3 vote. My brothers and sisters, fellow councilmen, the Confederate flag is a representation of hatred, a representation of slavery. It's a representation of the denial of women and blacks to vote. If we allow the flag to fly, it is a symbol of white supremacy. It's a symbol of murder. Mr. Mayor, we're asking council to revisit the issue of the Confederate flag removal. It is important for the local government to have the power to remove or to change an erected monument or any other structure in their localities. We're asking for the local state representatives to lead this resolution. We also are asking that City Council, along with the City Attorney, to develop a resolution to be presented to the State Attorney General for review and to our local state representatives for approval, then send it to the General Assembly to amend this awful state law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a statement I too would like to read, if that's okay. I have a statement I too would like to read, if that's okay. The Danville Museum of Fine Arts and History's Board of Directors requested council to remove the Confederate flag from the monument and display it inside the museum. During the November 6, 2014 meeting, council heard viewpoints from citizens who opposed and supported removing the flag. Back in November, Mr. Mayor, when members of the museum came before us, how I voted was as follows. I voted that we allow the museum, I voted with the law that we would allow the museum to go to the Attorney General, to ask the Attorney General to look at this matter, and it never happened. I spoke to the director of the museum and asked the director of the museum personally if the museum board, since they made the request to cancel, if the board of directors from the museum would please consult the Attorney General. In my statement on November the 6th, which many African Americans, some, got upset because of the way I voted because it was stated to us that the Attorney General in the state of Virginia needs to look at this matter. And that's what I sent back to the board of directors of the museum, and nothing seemed to happen. I spoke to them again several weeks afterwards and asked them that you presented this to council. Can we please stand together? And still haven't heard anything from the board of directors of the museum. Council heard viewpoints from citizens who opposed or supported removing the flag. After much discussion, City Attorney Clark Whitfield revealed that council cannot, under Virginia law, legally remove the Confederate flag from the grounds of the museum. My vote against removing the flag was based on that alone. The law. Citizens have asked council to state where we stand in regards to this issue. I would like to see the flag removed from the monument and placed on display inside the museum. The tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina has ignited many debates in surrounding communities and various states. People are boldly taking a stance and working towards removing the Confederate flag, whether it be in license plates or Capitol grounds. Therefore, it is my hope that council requests assistance from the Attorney General to expedite the removal of the Confederate flag and have it included inside the museum where all can continue learning about the history of Danville, Virginia. A couple of weeks ago, Mr. Mayor, we had the opportunity to meet with Pennsylvania County Board of Supervisors in a joint meeting.
Excuse me, Mr. Johnson. Would you turn whoever has the music?
In that joint
phone.
I apologize, Mr. Johnson.
That's okay. In that joint meeting with Pennsylvania County Board of Supervisors, we learned a lot in that meeting. One thing that we learned in that meeting was that Danville, Virginia was had the second highest unemployment rate other than Martinsville, Virginia. We also learned that Danville, Virginia, second city in the state of Virginia, has the highest crime rate. We need to work together to move our city and our community forward. And Mr. Mayor, I ask that we consider it, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Can I have a point of order? Are we in the regular meeting now? Is public comment over?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. I didn't. Okay.
Anyone else wish to speak before we, Mr. Gistrap?
Point of order also, was there a resolution put on the floor? Mr. Clark? Larry, what was are you requesting action of council tonight?
Yes, I'm asking that council would revisit the issue of the Confederate flag removal. I'm asking if the mayor or whatever, I am making a motion, yes, sir.
I interpreted that as not necessarily tonight, but that he wanted something well thought out that would be reviewed by council and by our office.
Yes.
It was your request, Mr. Campbell. What was your intent?
My intent is that it's important for council to revisit the issue of the Confederate flag. And I think the proper order, Mr. Winfield, was for us to go into work session at some point and discuss it, and then we bring it back on the floor, whatever, but I'd like to have that revisited.
Okay, so you agree with what Mr. Whitfield just said you understood you want, is that correct?
Pardon me?
You agree with Mr. Whitfield that he understood you're asking at some point to address this?
Yes, if I'm in protocol, the right procedure.
Is that what you understood?
That's what I understood, sir.
Okay, Mr. Gistrap.
No, I was just clarification. I thought I heard somewhat of a motion in there for council action. I just wanted to clarify
Clarification on John's request. So, Mr. Mayor, would they be done automatically by your power as a mayor to put this in work session, or does council need to vote on?
Could you repeat that again?
Does council have to vote to reopen the discussion? Or you just automatically bring it onto work session?
I don't know if a vote is required, Mr. Council, to reopen this discussion.
Typically, for something to be put on a work session, unless a majority of council oppose the issue, we typically put things on the work session all the time, and that's because that's the proper place for things like that, to work things out. So I don't think it requires a vote, but if there was a consensus.
Are you okay with the work session discussion, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Campbell? Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, mention has been made several times tonight about requesting an opinion from the Attorney General. I reached out to the Attorney General's office last week anticipating that that might be an issue. I presented the facts of the case and just asked them if they would in fact issue an opinion. I did not ask for an opinion, and they have told me that they respectfully would decline to issue that opinion.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Just say why? We have a reason why?
It said that I presented the facts, and I presented the issue as whether or not the flag which flies from the monument is part of the monument and or whether it can be removed. And their response was that, as it says, we respectfully decline, as attorneys general consistently have declined to render legal opinions on questions that run on specific factual determinations. They cited several attorney general opinions from 2009, 1980, 1981, and they said the declaration of any component part as being part or not part of a monument is a factual matter and therefore beyond the scope of the legal opinion of their office.
So, Mr. Gistrap, I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield, to follow up, was that decision made because they consider this to be a local matter or something else?
Something else. They said because it was, they said it's a factual issue, whether or not, and therefore they have declined to render an opinion.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Does that mean it's like a court's decision, or?
Pardon me?
Well, you say it's beyond their scope. Does that mean it's a court decision?
It doesn't, it just means that they
Or a
will not
lawmaker's
write us an
decision?
opinion on whether or not the flag is part of the monument and whether or not the flag could be taken down or has to remain on the monument. That's what it means. It doesn't say, it doesn't mean anything about the court.
Mr. Shanks?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I respectfully was going to say that it sounds to me that the Attorney General is saying it is in fact a legal issue that would have to be decided by the courts because it's based on fact and the evidence would have to be presented to a judge. So I know Mr. Whitfield's the attorney in the room, but it sounds awful clear to me that that's what that opinion's saying is it needs to be settled in court. He's not gonna settle it.
Mr. Whitfield, I think all of us have a number of questions, and you being the attorney, you have to decide how and if you want to respond in open session. Obviously, this brings up a lot of questions. Let me ask you specifically: does Danville City Council have the authority to make the decision whether the flag stays up or down?
That would be something I would prefer to discuss with you in a closed meeting because it's attorney-client privileged.
Okay. Further discussion?
And you did talk to the AG office?
Yes, sir. I spoke with the opinions counsel, person that writes the opinions for the Attorney General.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our meeting of June 2nd, 2015? Mr. Vice Mayor, second. Mr. Buckner. Discussion on the motion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckner?
Aye.
Reverend Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh?
Aye.
Mayor Saunders?
Aye.
Mr. Shanks?
Aye.
Mr. Vogler?
Aye.
Consideration of adopting an ordinance to appropriate funds to replace Danville's E911 service phone system. Is there a motion? Mr. Buckner.
I'd like to make a motion to approve an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2016 budget appropriation ordinance to provide for FY 2016 PSAP Public Safety Awareness Point grant from the Virginia E911 Services Board in the amount of $150,000 for the replacement of Danville's existing 911 phone system.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Vice Mayor, discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Reverend Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh?
Aye.
Mayor Saunders?
Aye.
Mr. Shanks?
Aye.
Mr. Vogler?
Aye.
Mr. Buckner?
Aye.
Adopting an ordinance to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds. Is there a motion to do so? Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose an ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city of Danville, Virginia, in the maximum principal amount of $9,750,000 to finance the acquisition, construction, and equipping of various capital projects.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Buckner, discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilstrap?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh?
Aye.
Mayor Saunders?
Aye.
Mr. Shanks?
Aye.
Mr. Vogler?
Aye.
Mr. Buckner?
Aye.
Reverend Campbell?
Aye.
Consideration of authorizing a resolution to issue general obligation bonds. Is there a motion? Mr. Shanks.
Mr. Mayor, I move for adoption of a resolution providing for the issuance, sale, and award by the City of Danville, Virginia, of one or more series of general obligation public improvement and refunding bonds heretofore authorized, providing for the form, details, and payment of such bonds, and providing for the refunding of certain outstanding bonds for
Okay,
final adoption.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Raleigh, discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh?
Aye.
Mayor Saunders?
Aye.
Mr. Shanks?
Aye.
Mr. Vogler?
Aye.
Mr. Buckner?
Aye.
Reverend Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap?
Aye.
Consideration of adopting an ordinance to designate the Arkansas Side Incorporated as being tax exempt. Open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Close the public hearing. Council, your pleasure. Mr. Shanks.
Mr. Mayor, I move for adoption of an ordinance to designate the ARC of Southside Incorporated as being exempt from local real estate and personal property taxes.
Okay, second, Mr. Vogler. Discussion on the motion. Will you call the roll?
Vice Mayor Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh?
Aye.
Mayor Saunders?
Aye.
Mr. Shanks?
Aye.
Mr. Vogler?
Aye.
Mr. Buckner?
Aye.
Reverend Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Consideration of approving and authorizing resolution for the consolidation of voting precincts and an ordinance repealing sections of Danville City Code. Open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak? Close the public hearing. Mr.
Said it was that voting precinct?
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Yeah, will you restate what you, that you're hearing on here now? I didn't get clarity on that when you read that.
Item C.
Yeah.
Consideration of approving authorizing resolution for the consolidation of voting precincts and an ordinance repealing
yeah.
section of Danville City Code.
Right, yeah, I wanted to speak on that.
Okay.
You're talking about consolidating a precinct here? Is this talking about a consolidation of a precinct? And
Yes, sir.
Forest Hill?
Closing one.
Closing Forest Hill, maybe
Forest
going
Hill and adding
to Langston.
To Langston, that's
Yeah.
correct, sir.
Yeah, I would like to speak on that. Have you all done a study on what effect it would have on the racial balance of that vote? Like, would it affect the white vote or would it affect the black vote if they move their precinct? Have a study been done on that?
The request came to us from the registrar's office, and it's my understanding that they had done some research prior to making a recommendation. I do not know all the details. I cannot answer that specific question, but a study and some research was done by the registrar's office. I don't have the answer.
My other question to that, are you considering having the Justice Department assist you in what effect that would have on the voting strength? Because in the past year, 2 polls were closed at the schools when the schools were closed, and it was our finding that some of the people who were voting were not notified because they had moved, the addresses had changed and different things, so they weren't aware that their poll precinct had changed. So what our concern is that if you consolidate Forest Hill poll, whether it will have effect on the Forest Hill residents or not, or whether Forest Hill have an issue about it. That being moved, because it would create a problem where they'd have to go from Forest Hill to Langston to vote, and that may dilute the voting strength of one racial makeup in that demographic, and that's what I'm asking. Have you done any research?
Well, you're asking the question, and perhaps I don't know if Mr. Whitfield has the answer, but the registrar, to my knowledge, had done the work. They did the research. The registrar made sure everything complied with the Justice Department requirements. I understand that the people in the area are aware of this recommendation to merge the two from Forest Hill to Langston School. I have not heard anyone express any concern as being addressed.
Okay. So what I'm getting from you is that the Justice Department has given you the okay under what she
What you're getting from me is I'm not aware of any problem. Let me ask the question. From the registrar, people in the back, are there any issues, any problem at all with the Justice Department, any complaint from the neighborhood, any problem with the racial of this, any issues at all that you are aware of in addressing Mr. Keene's question?
Mr. Mayor, can we ask her to come to the microphone, please, so people can hear her?
Yes, ma'am. Would you come down, please? Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir. I think there are other registrars.
Madam Registrar, if you would just repeat that into the microphone for the benefit of those who are watching at home and listening here.
I'm Peggy Petty, the General Registrar for the City of Danville. We're no longer under the rule. We don't have to have pre-clearance from the Department of Justice anymore for a move. Also, the City of Danville is an at-large voting district. We don't elect any of you by district, so the dilution of any voting by race doesn't come into play. There are no statistics racially in the city for the citizens. There is nothing on voter registration that defines any of the race qualifications. We do have some census data blocks that we could look at. I didn't bring that tonight with me. I'd had it previously with us. Our concern had nothing to do with any issues except for the safety of the voters and the convenience of the voters. All the voters will be notified. That is required by code. As soon if we get approval, we will start that process immediately, and the voter cards, the voter notices, now their letters, will go out in the next few months, no later than 2 weeks before the November 3rd election. It would be a permanent change. That is what we're asking for. There is always an issue when we mail out the notices. We know we're going to get a return rate on those. That's the way the voters, the burden falls on the voters to notify our office. We have to have it in writing. They can't call us. No one can tell us someone's moved. We have to have it from the voter in writing with a signature to update their record. So when we have those returns, if they come back with a yellow sticker from the post office, we send a new mailing to that address asking them to update their address. And yes, there will be some. We do everything in our power to notify the voters. They'll get the notice. We'll have a brightly colored piece of paper in there reminding them this is a change, and to be aware, to make sure they look at their records. Closer to the election, we will do the media releases to remind the voters of the changes. We heard no issues when we had to just move the location for the previous 2 school closures. We didn't have any problems. Yes, we have returned mail. We didn't have anything that came to our office, phone calls, or anyone complaining that we didn't try and notify them. And on election
is this
day.
addressing your concerns? Is Ms. Patty addressing your concerns?
You know, and I know we don't have time. I do have, we worked the polls the last time, and that's how we compiled our information, that people were not voting when they moved the polls. I don't know what I would ask if you move a poll to keep statistics of whether it dilute the vote. It doesn't matter whether it's at large or whether it is a precinct voting. Pre-clearance was removed by the vote recently, but in Danville we fought pre-clearance bailout once before, and that was the same concern. If they move polls, it can have an impact on the voter turnout.
Just to make sure that I understand, are you concerned about that the registrar's office is in compliance with the Justice Department? Is that your concern?
No, my concern is if they move the poll, will it dilute the vote in it?
Will they lose votes?
Will it dilute it? Will it change the number of votes, the statistics? If you move a poll from, let's say, Forest Hill to Langston School,
I don't know about the
less people vote.
All voters will be notified of the precinct change.
Right.
They will know, those who will go into Forest Hill will know that they need to go to Langston. They will get advance notice.
I understand that. That's what my concern is. In the past, when they sent out the notices to the 2 polls that were closed, one was closed at Woodrow and one was closed at Taylor. Taylor was moved to O.T. Bonner, and they moved Woodrow to the Salvation Army.
Okay, well, we have been assured that they will be notified and properly notified.
Well, but people in these areas, a lot of them don't receive the newspaper, and they don't read the newspaper, and many of them do not listen to certain radio stations. And my concern is that if you move a poll, you need to make sure that you do not dilute the vote strength by notifying, make sure people. So
I agree.
thank you, and I'll try.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Close public hearing. Council pleasure. Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the combining of Ward 5 voting precinct located at Forest Hills Elementary School with the Ward 3 voting precinct located at the Langston Focus School.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Gilstrap. Discussion on the motion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Raleigh.
Aye.
Mayor Saunders.
Aye.
Mr. Shanks.
Aye.
Mr. Vogler.
Aye.
Mr. Buckner.
Aye.
Reverend Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller.
Aye. And number 3. Number 3. Mr. Gilstrap.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of an ordinance repealing section 12 15 of Chapter 12 of the Danville City Code and amending and reordaining Section 12-13 of the Danville City Code.
There a second? Mr. Campbell, discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Mayor Saunders.
Aye.
Mr. Shanks.
Aye.
Mr. Vogler.
Aye.
Mr. Buckner.
Aye.
Reverend Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh.
Aye.
Consideration of authorizing a resolution granting an easement to Piedmont Lands. Open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak? Yes, sir. And your familiar name, please.
I'm R.J. Lackey. I'm an
Yes,
attorney
sir.
for Woods Rogers, and I represent the owners of this property. Council, thank you for your time. Honestly, I'm going to make this real brief because it's been a long night and don't want to be respectful of your time. The owners would like an easement on this property for two reasons. There's a loading dock that was built about 80 years ago that's 2 feet on city-owned property. So it's to clear up that title issue so that we can get title insurance. Second reason, we've had it a little bit more expansive since we're coming in front of council anyway. We want to have that property available for access to the loading dock itself for the trucks, and with the possibility of outdoor dining and outdoor activity and parking on that lot.
Any questions, Mr. Lackey? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Close public hearing. Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt a resolution granting an easement to Piedmont Lands of Virginia LLC and J.R. Atkinson Sr. for property located at 601 Craghead Street.
Okay, there's a second, Mr. Gilstrap. Discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Shanks.
Did you say Mr. Shanks?
Yes.
Mayor, members of council, I, Fredo Shanks III, do hereby state that I have a conflict of interest regarding the consideration of a resolution granting an easement to Piedmont Lands LLC and J.R. Atkinson Sr. on property located at 601 Craighead Street listed in the agenda item, new business item D. Therefore, pursuant to the State and Local Government Conflict of Interest Act, Virginia Code Section 2.2-3112, I must abstain from voting on this matter.
Thank you.
Mr. Vogler.
Aye.
Mr. Buckner.
Aye.
Reverend Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Raleigh.
Aye.
Mayor Saunders.
Aye. Consideration of canceling the regular meeting. City Council scheduled for Tuesday, August 4, 2015, and scheduling a special meeting of City Council on Thursday, August 6, 2015, to permit members of council and staff to attend a local national night out event. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, I move for the adoption of resolution canceling the regular meeting of City Council scheduled for Tuesday, August 4th, 2015, and scheduling a special meeting of City Council on Thursday, August 6th, 2015.
Second, Mr. Buckner. Discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Vogler.
Aye.
Mr. Buckner.
Aye.
Reverend Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Gilstrap.
Aye.
Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller. Mr. Raleigh.
Aye.
Mayor Saunders.
Aye.
Mr. Shanks.
Aye.
Communications, Mr. Manager.
No report, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Attorney.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Nothing, sir.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Buckner.
Yeah, I'd just like to let everyone know to please keep the family, the Scott family, in your prayers and thoughts as our city has lost a very, very, very strong woman in our community, and that's Miss Mary Scott, who passed away last week. And just like everybody to keep them in their thoughts and prayers. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Reverend Campbell.
Yes, I'd like to ditto what Councilman Buckner just stated, that our family, our hearts and my family goes out for the Wendell Scott family, this Mother Scott passing, and only God's Spirit is able to heal the emptiness of the pains of grief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilstrap.
I too wish to convey my condolences to the Scott family. And Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your patience this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Jones.
I too plan on being with the Scott family on Thursday. Our prayers and thoughts are with you, the entire family. I also want to take out time to say to Dr. Stan Jones, welcome to Danville, and on a night like this, we're glad to have you. And to all the school board members, the school teachers, heard a lot tonight about Danville Public Schools. I'm proud of what you all are doing, and I ask that your teachers, school board members, please continue to do what you're doing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Miller.
I'd like to welcome Stanley Jones. I heard him first interviewing several months ago, and my comment to Ed Polahamus was, this man sends out good vibes. I think he's going to do all right. And I continue to hold that opinion, and I think we're very fortunate to have attracted him to Danville to help our schools. The Wendell Scott family, we got to go down to the Hall of Fame to see Wendell Scott inducted. And sometimes we forget the remarkable woman who was behind him. And I hope he's gotten as far as he did support. And so, peace to the family. And again, thank you for everybody coming out tonight. It's always interesting when we have these issues. And it's good to hear from the citizens on all sides of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rowley.
Mr. Mayor, just thinking of the Scott family. Thank you.
Mr. Shanks.
I too hope to make it to the funeral Thursday. I certainly want to pass along my sincere thoughts and prayers to Wendell Scott's family. And also wanted to thank Dr. Stanley Jones for being here this evening. It's an opportunity for us to get to meet him here at council, and I'm glad that he was here. Finally, I'm deeply saddened that we endured another long, lengthy meeting on the same topic that we've been on for years, or it seems like for years. It's actually been just a couple of times. It's a situation here where we're being told that the Attorney General cannot render an opinion, and we're being accused or being threatened with lawsuits on both sides. And it's, I certainly hope that we can, I'm saddened that this situation has come up. As one of the speakers said tonight, we're a community that has not been divided for the most part. And I just hate to see us go through this discussion over and over again. And I'm worried that you'll see more of it come up in the future. So I appreciate everybody that was here tonight that presented their opinions. I appreciate the fact that everybody was here respectful of each other, and I think that's a positive sign for our community. But in the long term, I hope that we can take some action to squash this battle that comes up periodically. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Vogler.
I too want to offer my thoughts and prayers to the Scott family, and I plan on being there Thursday for the funeral. And as mentioned, a lot of us got to go down and be a part of the Hall of Fame induction earlier this year, and it was a tremendous ceremony and filled us all with pride. And I personally hope that we can have a discussion in the community about having a Wendell Scott Museum here in Danville. Something I think would be fantastic, and possibly in collaboration with the Wendell Scott Foundation, which does a whole lot of good work in our community and Warwick and everything that they're doing there. And I certainly would love to have that conversation and hope that that's a discussion we can have here in the future. Also, I want to mention I was reading the Richmond Times the other day, and they had an article about Open Data Richmond, which they just launched this week. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, that's, they're talking about how this great thing, they've got this new website, and it talks about how they've got all the data accessible and people can go and look at it. And then I remembered, we launched Open Data Danville several months ago. And it has complete access to everything in the city. Expenditures, every dime, every dollar, budgets, everything is on there, more accessible than it's ever been. Something that I'd pushed for a long time, and proud that Danville led the way on this. We were one of the first places in Virginia to do this. And now you see Richmond and other places that followed. And there was a quote in there from one of their officials that said, "This is a big step for the city of Richmond. This places us in line with what we think are Tier 1 cities." He must have been talking about Danville, because we were out in front of them on that. So I'm proud of our city for being one of the first in Virginia. And lastly, About a month ago, I reached out to the city manager and the deputy city manager regarding the process for naming one of our municipal buildings after someone and the process you have to go through. And I've had a chance in the past few weeks to begin that preliminary work and reach out to folks who may want to get involved in this effort. It's an arduous process you got to go through to get something named after a person, but it's one that I hope in this instance we can achieve. So tonight I'd like to declare my intent to submit a proposal that would name our downtown public library after the late Ruby Archie. Most people know that Ruby Archie was the first female mayor in the history of Danville, serving in that capacity from 1998 to 2000. She was much more than that. In addition to her 16 years on city council, she spent 37 years as an English teacher, impacting the lives of so many people in our region, including a lot that are in this room tonight. And as a place designed to educate those in our community, I can think of no better place to honor Mrs. Archie than our public library. So I look forward to working with anyone who would like to help in this initiative. There's petitions that have to be signed and other steps that have to be taken, but I believe very strongly that this is an effort worth doing. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor Saunders.
The Scott family, please pray for them and pray for our city. Meeting adjourned.